Introduction. Throughout history, a handful of inventions have changed everything. They shaped how we write, how we see, how we travel, and how we connect. From ancient discoveries to modern breakthroughs, each invention became a turning point in human progress. In this video, we'll uncover some of the most important creations that transformed the world as we know it. Stay with me, you might be surprised at how far these ideas have taken us. Paper. The invention of paper is one of the most important milestones in the history of human civilization. It transformed the way people recorded, preserved, and transmitted knowledge. Long before its appearance, different cultures relied on a variety of materials to capture ideas and store information. In Mesopotamia, scribes pressed symbols into clay tablets. In Egypt, papyrus scrolls were created from reeds growing along the Nile. In Europe, parchment made from animal skins became the preferred medium for manuscripts. Each of these methods had value, but all were limited by cost, durability, or practicality. Clay was heavy, papyrus was fragile, and parchment required enormous resources. There was a need for something lighter, cheaper, and easier to produce. In ancient China, during the Han Dynasty, that need found its answer. In the year 105 CE, an official of the imperial court named Kai Luan presented a new material to the emperor. He had developed a process that involved pulping natural fibers, suspending them in water, and pressing the mixture into thin sheets. The result was strong, smooth, and flexible, a medium unlike anything used before. Kai Luan's formula relied on readily available materials such as tree bark, hemp, rags, and old fishing nets. The process was simple enough to be reproduced consistently, yet the impact of this innovation was profound. Paper immediately proved more practical than bamboo strips, which were bulky and difficult to transport, or silk, which was expensive and far too valuable to be used widely. With paper, writing became accessible to officials, scholars, and eventually ordinary people. The Chinese administration quickly adopted it for record-keeping and communication, and literature began to flourish as stories, poems, and philosophical texts could be copied more easily and distributed more broadly. Education, governance, and culture all benefited from this seemingly humble invention. From China, the technology of papermaking spread gradually. By the 6th century, it reached Korea and Japan, where it became deeply intertwined with art and calligraphy. Japanese artisans refined the craft, producing washi paper that was prized for its texture and beauty. To the west, papermaking traveled along the Silk Road. By the 8th century, knowledge of the process had reached Samarkand, where skilled workers established some of the first paper mills outside of China. From there, the Islamic world embraced and advanced the technique. Baghdad became a major center of papermaking, and scholars in the House of Wisdom used the new medium to preserve, translate, and expand upon scientific and philosophical works from Greece, Persia, and India. The use of paper allowed knowledge to circulate more widely, fueling the intellectual achievements of the Islamic Golden Age. By the 12th century, papermaking had spread into Europe through Spain and Italy. The timing was critical. Europe was experiencing growth in commerce, governance, and education, and the demand for a reliable and affordable writing material was rising. Parchment remained too costly to meet the expanding needs of universities, monasteries, and city administrations. Paper, by contrast, could be produced at scale. Mills were established across the continent, and by the late Middle Ages, paper was becoming the dominant medium for manuscripts and records. The invention of paper reached its true global potential in the 15th century, when Johannes Gutenberg introduced the printing press. The two technologies complemented each other perfectly. Without inexpensive and abundant paper, printing would not have been practical. Without the press, the impact of paper would have remained limited. Together, they created the conditions for the spread of literacy and knowledge on an unprecedented scale. Books, pamphlets, and newspapers could now be produced in large numbers, reaching people far beyond the elite classes. This combination fueled the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the scientific revolution. Ideas moved across borders with a speed that would have been unimaginable in earlier centuries, and the very structure of society began to shift as a result. Over the centuries, paper embedded itself in every aspect of human life. Governments used it for laws, treaties, and decrees. Businesses relied on it for contracts and transactions. Writers, scientists, and philosophers turned to it to record their insights, leaving behind works that continue to influence the world. Maps guided explorers, sheet music preserved compositions, and personal letters carried emotions across distances. Paper became not just a medium for information, but a vessel of human expression in all its forms. Even in the modern age, when digital technologies dominate communication, paper has not lost its relevance. Books remain central to culture, education, and personal reflection. Newspapers and magazines continue to shape public discourse. Paper is also essential in packaging, design, and countless practical applications of everyday life. Its physicality gives it a presence that digital media cannot entirely replace. A handwritten note, a certificate, or a printed photograph holds a tangible quality that speaks directly to human senses. The invention of paper was not simply about creating a new material. It was about enabling ideas to endure and travel across time and space. By making writing more accessible, it allowed civilizations to expand the boundaries of their memory. It supported the growth of science, art, and governance. It prepared the foundation for printing, education, and the modern information age. Few inventions have had such a far-reaching and lasting influence. From its beginnings in the Han Dynasty to its global presence today, paper remains one of the most significant achievements in human history. It is a reminder that sometimes the most transformative technologies are not the most complex, but the ones that quietly reshape the way people think, communicate, and imagine the future. Printing on paper. The invention of printing with movable type was one of the greatest breakthroughs in human history. While paper provided humanity with a medium for writing, movable type printing transformed the way knowledge could be copied and spread. It marked the beginning of mass communication, creating the foundation for literacy, science, and culture as we know them today. The story begins in China during the 11th century, in the Song dynasty. A man named Bai Shang is credited with creating the first system of movable type around the year 1040 CE. His idea was elegant yet revolutionary. Instead of carving entire pages of text into wooden blocks, which was the common method of block printing at the time, he created individual characters that could be arranged and rearranged to form words and sentences. Each character was made from baked clay, hardened by fire, and stored carefully so that it could be used again whenever needed. This invention offered a remarkable advantage. Traditional woodblock printing required a new block to be carved for every page. The process was slow, labor-intensive, and limited in flexibility. By contrast, movable type allowed printers to reuse characters infinitely, rearranging them to form any new text. With this method, documents could be produced more quickly, and mistakes could be corrected without starting from the beginning. It was a system that anticipated modern typography centuries before it took root in Europe. Despite its ingenuity, movable type in China faced practical limitations. The Chinese writing system contains thousands of unique characters, making the storage and organization of type a complex challenge. Nevertheless, the idea did not disappear. It spread across East Asia, influencing printing in Korea, where artisans refined the technology further. In the 13th century, Korean printers developed movable type made of metal, a step that gave their system durability and precision. Some of the earliest surviving printed books using metal movable type date to the 1370s, predating similar works in Europe by several decades. While East Asia was experimenting with this new technology, Europe was still reliant on handwritten manuscripts and woodblock printing. The arrival of paper in the West during the Middle Ages prepared the ground for change, but it was not until the 15th century that movable type found its full potential. In Mainz, Germany, around 1450, Johannes Gutenberg developed a printing system that combined metal movable type with oil-based ink and a mechanical press. His design allowed for sharp impressions on paper, consistent replication, and rapid production compared to any previous method. Gutenberg's invention had an immediate and far-reaching impact. The first major work printed with his press, the Gutenberg Bible, demonstrated the clarity and beauty that the new technology could achieve. But more importantly, it showed that books could be produced in large numbers at a fraction of the cost of hand copying. Within decades, Printing presses spread across Europe, from Italy to England, transforming the intellectual and cultural landscape. The rise of movable type printing coincided with major turning points in European history. The Renaissance was fueled by the availability of classical texts and new works that could now circulate widely. The Protestant Reformation gained momentum as Martin Luther's writings were reproduced and distributed quickly across borders. Scientific discoveries could be recorded, published, and shared with scholars across the continent, accelerating progress in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. For the first time, ideas could travel faster than armies, and words became as powerful as weapons. By the 16th century, printing presses operated in every major European city, producing not only religious and scholarly texts but also practical guides, pamphlets, and news sheets. Literacy expanded as books became more affordable, and education was no longer the privilege of a small elite. Movable type printing created a public sphere where knowledge, debate, and information shaped societies in ways that had never been possible before. In the centuries that followed, the printing press remained at the center of human progress. It supported the Enlightenment, when philosophers and political thinkers could reach new audiences. It preserved the knowledge of the Industrial Revolution, documenting scientific breakthroughs and technical manuals that fueled further innovation. It carried literature, poetry, and newspapers into homes, creating shared cultural experiences and shaping modern identity. Even today, the legacy of movable type is evident. Although digital media now dominates communication, the concept of reusable characters arranged to form text lives on in every font, keyboard, and screen. The transition from clay and metal type to pixels and algorithms represents continuity rather than replacement. The principles established in the 11th century by Shang and perfected in the 15th century by Gutenberg remain at the core of how humanity shares information. The invention of movable type printing was not merely a new tool. It was a transformation of human society, multiplying the power of paper and amplifying the reach of ideas. By making knowledge reproducible on a massive scale, it allowed civilizations to move forward more quickly than ever before. It stands as one of the clearest examples of how a single innovation can alter the course of history. Glass. The story of glass is one of the longest and most influential in human history. Unlike many other inventions, it was not the product of a single moment or a single mind, but rather a gradual discovery and refinement that stretched across centuries. From its earliest accidental formation in fire and sand to its role in modern science and technology, glass has accompanied humanity's progress, shaping the way people see the world, sometimes literally. The earliest known glass dates back more than 4,000 years, to ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. At first, glass was not transparent and not even intended for windows. It was used in beads, ornaments, and vessels, prized for its color and shine rather than clarity. Craftsmen learned to melt sand with lime and ash, producing a solid that could be shaped into small decorative objects. These items were rare and valuable, reserved for elites and temples, and their creation required great skill. For centuries, glass remained a luxury material, its secrets guarded closely by artisans who passed down their methods within small circles. The transformation of glass into a functional material came much later. In the 1st century BCE, glassblowing was discovered in the eastern Mediterranean, likely in the region of modern-day Syria. This technique revolutionized production. By inflating molten glass with a pipe, artisans could create shapes more quickly and with less material than ever before. Bottles, jars, and drinking vessels became more affordable, and glass began to spread into everyday use. The Romans embraced this innovation, establishing workshops across their empire and integrating glass into domestic life. For the first time, glass was no longer just a treasure for the wealthy but an accessible commodity for broader society. One of the most significant turning points in the history of glass was the development of transparency. Early glass was often cloudy or tinted, but through refinement of ingredients and firing methods, artisans learned to produce clearer material. By the late Roman period, flat sheets of glass began to appear in architecture, used in windows to admit light while keeping out wind and rain. Although these early panes were far from perfect, they marked the beginning of a transformation in how people interacted with their surroundings. The idea of looking through a man-made material at the world beyond was something entirely new. During the Middle Ages, glass continued to evolve, both as a craft and as a symbol. In cathedrals across Europe, stained glass windows became a central feature of religious architecture. These vast, colorful artworks filled interiors with light and told biblical stories to congregations who could not read. The production of stained glass required extraordinary skill, as artisans combined chemistry, art, and architecture into a single expression of devotion. While these windows were far from transparent, they demonstrated the versatility of glass and its ability to shape human experience on a monumental scale. It was in the late medieval and early Renaissance periods, however, that glass began to reveal its true potential for science. In Venice, particularly on the island of Murano, glassmakers perfected techniques for producing clear and high-quality glass. This innovation made possible the invention of lenses, small curved pieces of glass that could bend and focus light. With lenses came eyeglasses, first recorded in Italy in the 13th century, offering a simple but life-changing solution for people with poor eyesight. For the first time, age and vision problems no longer limited a scholar's ability to read and write. The significance of lenses extended far beyond personal vision. By the 16th and 17th centuries, lenses were combined into instruments that opened entirely new worlds. The telescope allowed humanity to observe the heavens with clarity, leading Galileo and others to discoveries that transformed astronomy. The microscope revealed the previously invisible world of cells and microorganisms, laying the foundation for modern biology and medicine. Both instruments were only possible because of glass, and both altered humanity's understanding of nature and the universe. In the modern era, glass became indispensable in countless fields. In architecture, large panes enabled the rise of skyscrapers and modern buildings filled with natural light. In science, laboratory glassware allowed precise experiments in chemistry and physics. In communication, glass played a key role in the development of cameras, projectors, and later, fiber optic cables that now carry data around the world at the speed of light. Every step of progress in optics, from the first spectacles to advanced telescopes observing distant galaxies, has been tied to the refinement of glass. Even in daily life, the presence of glass is constant and essential. Windows, mirrors, bottles, screens, and countless other objects reflect how deeply integrated this material has become in human civilization. Its properties, clarity, durability, and the ability to be shaped into almost any form make it unlike any other substance. The invention of glass was not a single event but a continuous process of discovery and improvement. From ancient beads to modern fiber optics, it has been a companion to human creativity and ambition. It allowed people not only to preserve and contain but also to see further and deeper, both into the cosmos and into the smallest building blocks of life. Few materials have shaped human perception, literally and figuratively, as profoundly as glass. Concrete. Concrete is one of the most transformative inventions in the history of construction. It gave human beings the ability to build structures stronger, larger, and more enduring than anything possible with wood, brick, or stone alone. Its story stretches back thousands of years, but it is most closely associated with the engineering achievements of ancient Rome, where concrete became the foundation of an empire's architecture and infrastructure. The earliest forms of concrete-like materials appeared in antiquity. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, builders mixed mud, clay, or gypsum with straw and aggregates to bind bricks and stones together. These primitive mixtures hardened over time and provided strength beyond what raw stone or brick could offer. Yet the true breakthrough came much later, when the Romans discovered how to harness volcanic ash, lime, and water to create a durable, versatile substance that we now recognize as concrete. Roman concrete, known as opus cementitium, was a mixture of lime mortar, volcanic ash called pozzolana, water, and stones or rubble. This combination produced a material with extraordinary resilience. Unlike earlier mortars, Roman concrete could set underwater, making it ideal for harbors, aqueducts, and bridges. This property alone gave Roman engineers unmatched freedom to design structures that other civilizations could not match. The Romans quickly realized the potential of this invention. With concrete, They constructed aqueducts that carried water over vast distances, ensuring the survival of their growing cities. They built massive amphitheaters, including the Colosseum, where tens of thousands could gather for public spectacles. They raised temples, baths, and basilicas that became the heart of civic life. Roads paved with concrete connected the empire, enabling trade, communication, and military movement across continents. Perhaps the most striking achievement of Roman concrete was in monumental architecture. The Pantheon in Rome, completed in the 2nd century CE, stands as one of the greatest examples of its power. Its dome, spanning over 40 meters, remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Nearly 2,000 years later, it still inspires awe, a testament to the durability of the material and the ingenuity of those who worked with it. The fact that Roman concrete structures continue to stand today, while many later constructions have crumbled, shows the extraordinary qualities of the invention. One of the reasons Roman concrete was so durable lies in its chemistry. Modern studies have revealed that the volcanic ash used by the Romans contained minerals that, over time, reacted with seawater and reinforced the material. Rather than weakening, Roman marine structures often grew stronger with age. This self-healing property of ancient concrete has intrigued scientists, who continue to study it in hopes of applying its principles to modern construction. After the fall of the Roman Empire, much of the knowledge of concrete was lost in Europe. For centuries, builders relied more heavily on stone masonry and other traditional methods. While lime mortars remained in use, the large-scale application of true concrete virtually disappeared. It was not until the 18th and 19th centuries that concrete reemerged as a major material, this time refined and adapted for modern industrial use. The revival came with the invention of Portland cement in the early 19th century. This new formulation, developed in England, provided a consistent and reliable binder for concrete. It could be mass-produced and standardized, making it the backbone of modern construction. With the addition of steel reinforcement in the late 19th century, concrete reached a new level of strength and flexibility. Reinforced concrete made possible skyscrapers, dams, highways, and countless forms of infrastructure that define the modern world. From Roman aqueducts to modern skyscrapers, the continuity of concrete's role in human civilization is clear. It is a material that bridges eras, cultures, and technologies. Its adaptability allows it to take on many forms, from massive structural supports to delicate architectural details. It has shaped cities, enabled global trade, and supported societies in ways that are often taken for granted. Today, concrete is the most widely used construction material on Earth. From bridges and tunnels to homes and schools, it forms the backbone of modern civilization. Billions of tons are produced each year, shaping skylines and landscapes across the planet. At the same time, engineers are looking for ways to improve it, making it stronger, more sustainable, and more durable, much like the concrete of ancient Rome. Concrete is more than just a building material. It is a symbol of permanence and human ambition. It represents the desire to create structures that endure, to shape environments that last beyond generations. The Romans first unlocked its potential, and humanity has continued to build upon that foundation ever since. The invention of concrete stands as one of the clearest examples of how a single material can define entire civilizations, leaving monuments that carry their memory through millennia. Clock, mechanical clock. The measurement of time has always been essential to human life. From the movement of the sun and stars to the changing of the seasons, people have sought ways to track and divide time in order to organize their activities. For millennia, timekeeping was based on natural rhythms and simple tools. Sundials marked the hours of daylight, while water clocks and sand hourglasses measured intervals with more consistency. These instruments served their purpose but lacked accuracy and reliability. The invention of the mechanical clock changed this forever. It transformed time from something observed in nature into something measured with precision, shaping economies, societies, and the modern sense of daily life. The earliest true mechanical clocks appeared in Europe during the late 13th century. Unlike earlier devices, they did not rely on flowing water or shifting sand, but instead used gears, weights, and escapements to regulate movement. The escapement was the crucial mechanism that allowed energy to be released in controlled steps, producing a regular ticking motion. With this innovation, it became possible to keep track of time in hours and eventually minutes with far greater accuracy than before. Many of the first mechanical clocks were installed in towers in public squares and cathedrals. They were large, heavy, and complex machines, often taking up entire rooms. Their purpose was not only practical but also symbolic. By striking bells at regular intervals, these clocks marked the passage of time for entire communities, bringing order to daily activities, religious rituals, and civic life. Townspeople no longer needed to rely solely on the position of the sun. Instead, they could coordinate work, trade, and worship according to the steady rhythm of the clock. The mechanical clock also carried deep cultural meaning. In medieval Europe, it represented the growing desire to measure and control time itself, reflecting changes in society. As commerce expanded and cities grew, precise timekeeping became increasingly important. Markets opened and closed at set hours, and transport schedules required coordination. In monasteries, where prayers and rituals were divided into strict intervals, clocks became essential for maintaining discipline. The spread of mechanical clocks reflected a shift from natural cycles to human-regulated time, laying the groundwork for the modern concept of punctuality. As technology advanced, mechanical clocks became more refined. By the 15th century, improvements in design allowed for smaller and more accurate mechanisms. Portable clocks began to appear, though they were still rare and costly. Clockmaking became a specialized craft, combining engineering, art, and precision. Cities such as Nuremberg and Florence became centers of horology, producing instruments that were as much works of beauty as they were tools of measurement. The increasing accuracy of clocks also contributed to scientific progress, providing a reliable way to record observations and conduct experiments. One of the greatest leaps in timekeeping came with the invention of the pendulum clock in the 17th century. Dutch scientist Christian Huygens applied the principle of the pendulum to regulate the escapement, dramatically improving accuracy. While earlier clocks might drift by minutes each day, pendulum clocks could keep time to within seconds. This breakthrough transformed astronomy, navigation, and physics. Sailors used accurate clocks to determine longitude at sea, an achievement that opened the way for safer global exploration and trade. Astronomers, meanwhile, relied on precise time measurements to chart the movement of celestial bodies, deepening humanity's understanding of the universe. Over the centuries, the mechanical clock became smaller, more reliable, and more widespread. Pocket watches and later wristwatches made personal timekeeping possible, integrating precision into everyday life. By the Industrial Revolution, factory schedules, train timetables, and urban routines all depended on synchronized clocks. Time was no longer a matter of approximation but an exact standard that organized entire societies. Mechanical clocks helped create the rhythm of modernity, regulating labor, commerce, and communication across nations. Even in the age of digital technology, the legacy of mechanical clocks endures. Atomic clocks now measure time with unimaginable precision, but the principles of gears, escapements, and oscillating regulators remain at the foundation of all timekeeping. The tick of a clock, once revolutionary, is still a familiar sound that connects centuries of innovation. The invention of the mechanical clock was more than a technical achievement. It was a cultural shift that altered the relationship between humans and time. By allowing people to measure hours and minutes with accuracy, it provided structure to daily life, discipline to society, and tools for scientific discovery. From the great clock towers of medieval Europe to the watches people carry today, mechanical timekeeping represents one of the most enduring legacies of human ingenuity. Paper money. For most of human history, trade was based on barter or the direct exchange of goods. Later, societies developed coinage made from precious metals such as gold, silver, and copper. Coins held intrinsic value and could be carried easily, but they also had limitations. Large transactions required heavy amounts of metal, and as economies expanded, the need for a lighter, more flexible system of exchange became clear. The invention of paper money marked one of the most transformative steps in the history of finance. It introduced the idea that value could be represented not by material substance but by trust in an issuing authority. The earliest known use of paper money appeared in China during the Tang dynasty in the 7th century. At first, merchants used promissory notes, written agreements that promised payment of coin at a later date. These documents were easier to carry than bags of copper coins and gradually began to circulate as a substitute for money itself. By the 11th century, under the Song dynasty, this practice evolved into a formal system. The government authorized the printing of jiaozi, considered the world's first official banknotes. Backed by state regulation, these notes could be exchanged for goods and were accepted across vast regions of China. The introduction of paper money represented a profound change. For the first time, currency was not tied directly to its material substance but to the authority that issued it. A piece of paper, nearly worthless in itself, carried value because people trusted that it could be exchanged for goods or coins. This required faith in the government or institution behind the notes. It was an abstract idea but one that made commerce far more efficient. Merchants could travel great distances with lightweight paper instead of heavy metal, allowing trade networks to expand across Asia. When the Mongol Empire rose in the 13th century, paper money spread even further. Under the rule of Kublai Khan, China relied heavily on printed notes, which were produced in large quantities and made from mulberry bark. European visitors such as Marco Polo wrote with amazement about this strange form of currency that was as good as gold in the markets of the East. In Europe, where coinage had deep cultural roots, the idea of paper money took centuries to be accepted. Yet the reports of travelers planted the seeds of curiosity about this revolutionary financial tool. Paper currency reached Europe in the 17th century, beginning in Sweden. In 1661, the Stockholm Banco issued the first European banknotes, offering an alternative to heavy copper coins. Other nations soon followed, as governments and banks recognized the advantages of paper-based currency. England, France, and the Netherlands all experimented with banknotes, tying their value to reserves of gold or silver. Over time, paper money became more widely trusted, especially as financial institutions grew stronger. The shift to paper money was not without challenges. Inflation, counterfeiting, and overprinting posed serious risks. When too many notes were issued without sufficient reserves, trust collapsed, and economies suffered. Several early experiments with paper money ended in crisis, showing how delicate the balance of trust could be. Nevertheless, the benefits were undeniable. Paper currency allowed governments to manage larger economies, finance projects, and engage in trade on a new scale. By the 18th and 19th centuries, paper money had become a standard feature of global commerce. Banknotes were issued with elaborate designs and security features to prevent forgery. National currencies developed, representing the strength and stability of states. As economies industrialized, paper money became the lifeblood of trade, wages, and investment. Its portability and flexibility made it indispensable for a world moving faster and growing more connected. In the 20th century, the link between paper money and precious metals was gradually severed. Most nations abandoned the gold standard, shifting fully to fiat money, currency that holds value solely because governments declare it legal tender. This development underscored the central principle of paper money. That value is not inherent in the material but in the trust placed in the system. Modern economies, from everyday purchases to global markets, rest on this foundation. Today, physical banknotes coexist with digital transactions, credit systems, and electronic currencies. Yet the invention of paper money remains a turning point in human history. It redefined wealth and exchange, making economic activity more fluid and adaptable. What began as promissory notes among Chinese merchants grew into a universal system that shapes every corner of modern life. The story of paper money is the story of abstraction, of moving from tangible wealth to symbolic representation. It demonstrated that the most powerful tools are not always material but conceptual. A simple piece of paper became the key to commerce, finance, and global trade. In its quiet way, the invention of paper money changed the structure of economies and the rhythm of human civilization, proving that trust itself could hold the weight of value. Gun. The story of the gun begins with the discovery of gunpowder in China more than 1,000 years ago. Gunpowder itself had already transformed the nature of warfare, powering early rockets, fire lances, and primitive explosives. Yet it was the development of the gun, a portable device capable of directing explosive force through a barrel, that reshaped the balance of power in societies across the world. Unlike the bow or the sword, the gun relied not on the strength or skill of the warrior but on the controlled mechanics of chemistry and engineering. The earliest form of the gun appeared in the 13th century. Chinese inventors created hand cannons, metal tubes loaded with gunpowder and a projectile, ignited through a touch hole with a burning fuse. These crude weapons were unreliable, heavy, and difficult to handle, but they marked the beginning of a new age. The concept was simple. An explosion could propel a projectile farther and faster than any human arm. Even in its roughest form, the gun introduced an entirely different relationship between humans and combat. By the 14th century, the idea spread along trade routes to the Middle East and Europe. Metallurgy advanced, and craftsmen began forging stronger barrels capable of withstanding the explosive pressure of gunpowder. The matchlock mechanism emerged in the 15th century, allowing soldiers to ignite the powder with a trigger-controlled burning match. This innovation transformed the gun from an unwieldy experiment into a practical battlefield weapon. It allowed infantry to carry firearms that could be fired with relative consistency, giving armies new tactical possibilities. The evolution of gun design continued steadily. The 16th century saw the introduction of the wheellock and flintlock systems, which replaced the burning match with sparks generated mechanically. These weapons were more reliable, especially in damp conditions, and easier to carry into battle. Flintlock muskets became standard across Europe, reshaping military organization. Armies shifted from reliance on knights and heavily armored cavalry to formations of infantry soldiers armed with firearms. The battlefield became dominated not by individual prowess but by collective firepower. The psychological impact of the gun was as significant as its physical power. Unlike traditional weapons, firearms could be used effectively by relatively untrained soldiers. This altered the structure of warfare, making it possible to arm large numbers of common troops with lethal efficiency. The balance of power tilted toward centralized states that could afford to equip and organize standing armies. Castles and fortresses, once nearly invincible against swords and arrows, fell quickly under the pressure of cannon and gunfire. The medieval world gave way to the early modern age, shaped by the roar of firearms. Guns also traveled with explorers, traders, and colonizers. In the 15th and 16th centuries, European expansion across the seas was supported by firearms, which gave small groups of soldiers a decisive advantage over larger forces still relying on traditional weapons. The gun became both a tool of conquest and a symbol of power. Its presence reshaped encounters between cultures, often with devastating consequences for those unprepared for its force. Over the centuries, firearms continued to evolve. Rifling, developed in the early modern period, introduced spiral grooves inside barrels, giving projectiles greater accuracy. The 19th century brought percussion caps, breech-loading mechanisms, and eventually repeating rifles, each improvement making firearms faster, more reliable, and deadlier. By the time of the Industrial Age, guns were no longer handmade devices but products of mass production, distributed on a scale the world had never seen before. The invention of the gun also had profound effects beyond the battlefield. It changed hunting practices, altered personal defense, and influenced social structures. The presence of firearms in civilian life created both new opportunities for security and new challenges for safety. Entire industries grew around the production, maintenance, and trade of guns, making them a permanent fixture in global economies. In the 20th century, firearms technology reached unprecedented levels. Semi-automatic and automatic weapons redefined combat, shifting from single-shot muskets to rapid-fire rifles and machine guns. Wars fought with such weapons inflicted destruction on a scale unimaginable in earlier centuries. Yet the principles remained rooted in that original idea, harnessing an explosion to propel a projectile. Today, the gun stands as one of the most consequential inventions in human history. It is inseparable from the story of power, conflict, and authority. From the hand cannons of medieval China to the precision-engineered firearms of the modern world, The trajectory of the gun reflects both human ingenuity and the profound consequences of technological change. The invention of the gun did not merely add a new weapon to the human arsenal. It shifted the very foundations of warfare, governance, and society. By equalizing the battlefield and amplifying the reach of force, it altered the path of civilizations. In its unassuming design, a barrel, a charge, and a projectile, the gun carries the weight of centuries of transformation, a reminder of how a single invention can redirect the course of history. Printing of maps, cartography. For as long as humans have traveled, they have needed ways to represent the world around them. Early maps were drawn by hand on clay, parchment, or animal skin, and often served local or symbolic purposes. They were limited in number, unique in form, and difficult to reproduce. Each copy had to be redrawn from scratch, which meant that knowledge of geography spread slowly, confined to small circles of navigators, scholars, or rulers. The invention of printing, combined with the art of cartography, changed this forever. The printing of maps transformed human understanding of space, distance, and the very shape of the world. The first printed maps appeared in Europe during the 15th century, shortly after the development of movable type printing. At first, woodblock printing was used, with entire maps carved into a single block of wood. These maps were relatively crude, but they made possible the reproduction of identical copies. For the first time, maps could be multiplied and distributed, no longer bound to the limitations of a single manuscript. Scholars, merchants, and travelers gained access to consistent representations of geography, and this consistency became a foundation for exploration. The combination of printing and cartography reached new heights during the Age of Exploration. As European sailors ventured across oceans in the 15th and 16th centuries, the demand for accurate maps grew rapidly. Printed atlases began to appear, most famously the works of cartographers such as Gerardus Mercator. His projection method, introduced in the 16th century, allowed navigators to plot courses on straight lines, making sea travel more practical and reliable. The fact that these maps could be printed and distributed widely meant that navigational knowledge did not remain the secret of a few but became a shared resource across nations. The spread of printed maps also reshaped education and scholarship. Geography became a subject that could be studied systematically, with students and scholars referring to identical visual representations. This standardization created a common frame of reference. People in distant lands could point to the same shapes, borders, and coastlines, gradually forming a shared picture of the Earth. The printing of maps thus turned geography from scattered local knowledge into a global science. Maps also played a role in politics and power. The ability to print and distribute maps gave rulers a tool to define and display their territories. Boundaries could be drawn, claims asserted, and empires imagined on paper. Maps became symbols of authority as much as tools for navigation. Colonizing powers used them to plan voyages, stake claims in foreign lands, and justify expansion. The lines drawn on printed maps often foreshadowed the borders of modern nations. In addition, printed maps had a cultural dimension. They shaped how people thought about the world and their place within it. For many, a map was the first visual encounter with lands they would never see. Atlases brought distant continents into homes and libraries, making the world feel both larger and more connected. This change in perception fueled curiosity, trade, and a growing sense of global interdependence. The technology of printing improved over time, allowing for greater detail, accuracy, and artistry. Copperplate engraving in the 16th century allowed cartographers to achieve finer lines and more precise coastlines than woodblocks could provide. By the 17th and 18th centuries, beautifully illustrated maps circulated across Europe, blending science with art. These maps were not only functional tools, but also cultural treasures, collected and admired for their beauty, as much as for their utility. The influence of printed maps extended into science. They supported advances in astronomy, navigation, and natural history. Explorers recorded new coastlines, scientists plotted observations of the stars, and naturalists mapped regions of flora and fauna. Each discovery could be reproduced and shared, building a collective body of geographic knowledge that steadily refined humanity's understanding of the planet. By the 19th century, with industrial-scale printing presses, maps became accessible to the general public. They appeared in schoolbooks, newspapers, and travel guides. No longer limited to scholars or sailors, maps entered the everyday lives of ordinary people. The printing of maps had democratized access to spatial knowledge, making it possible for anyone to hold the world in their hands. Today, digital mapping and satellite imagery have transformed cartography once again, but the principle remains the same. The ability to replicate and distribute maps changes how people see the world. The printing of maps was the first great leap in that direction, a revolution that turned geography from scattered local drawings into a universal language of exploration and understanding. The invention was not only about ink on paper. It was about multiplying knowledge, spreading orientation, and giving humanity a shared vision of Earth itself. Through printed maps, the world became measurable, navigable, and, for the first time, truly global. Microscope. For most of human history, the natural world was studied with the naked eye. Plants, animals, rocks, and stars could be observed in detail only as far as human sight allowed. But beyond that threshold, the tiny structures hidden within drops of water, the invisible patterns shaping life, remained unknown. The invention of the microscope revealed this hidden universe. It gave humanity a tool to peer into realms smaller than imagination, opening new sciences and changing our understanding of existence itself. The origins of the microscope trace back to the late 16th century in Europe. Spectacle makers had long experimented with lenses, grinding glass to aid the vision of the elderly or those with failing eyesight. In the Netherlands, around the year 1590, Hans and Zacharias Janssen, a father and son team of lens makers, are often credited with constructing one of the first compound microscopes. By placing two lenses in a tube, they found that objects appeared greatly magnified. Though rudimentary, their device marked the beginning of an entirely new way of seeing. In the decades that followed, microscopes were refined. Lenses were improved, tubes lengthened, and magnification increased. Yet the true potential of the instrument was revealed in the hands of Antony van Leeuwenhoek, a Dutch tradesman with no formal scientific training. Working in the 17th century, he crafted simple microscopes with lenses of remarkable clarity, capable of magnifying up to 200 times. Through these instruments, he became the first to observe bacteria, protozoa, and the circulation of blood cells. He called these tiny forms animalcules, and his letters to the Royal Society of London astonished the learned world. Leeuwenhoek's discoveries revealed that life existed on a scale previously unimaginable. A drop of pond water swarmed with invisible creatures. Human tissues contained structures no eye had seen. The world was far more complex and far more alive than anyone had suspected. The microscope had opened a window into a hidden dimension of reality, one that would become central to biology and medicine. The development of the compound microscope advanced steadily through the 17th and 18th centuries. Scholars used it to study plant tissues, insects, and the fine structures of minerals. Robert Hooke, in his famous book Micrographia of 1665, published detailed illustrations of what he saw through his microscope. He described the cellular structure of cork, coining the term cell, a word that would later become fundamental to biology. The microscope allowed natural philosophers to transform speculation into direct observation, building the foundations of modern science. Yet microscopes were not without problems. Early lenses suffered from distortions, causing blurred or colored images. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, opticians worked to improve clarity and magnification. By combining different kinds of glass in achromatic lenses, they corrected many of these flaws. With these refinements, microscopes became powerful tools for professional laboratories and universities, not just curiosities for wealthy collectors. In the 19th century, the microscope became central to medicine. Scientists such as Rudolf Virchow used it to study diseased tissues, leading to the formulation of the cell theory that all living organisms are composed of cells, and that disease often begins at the cellular level. This insight revolutionized medical understanding, shifting the study of illness from vague imbalances of the body to precise biological causes. The microscope transformed diagnosis, research, and treatment, laying the groundwork for modern pathology. The instrument also deepened humanity's understanding of reproduction, heredity, and development. Microscopic studies of sperm, eggs, and embryos revealed processes that connected the smallest units of life to the continuity of species. The discoveries made possible by the microscope wove together medicine, biology, and chemistry into a new, unified science of life. By the 20th century, microscopes had advanced far beyond simple optical devices. The invention of the electron microscope in the 1930s pushed the boundaries even further. Instead of light, it used beams of electrons, achieving magnifications thousands of times greater than traditional lenses. With this tool, scientists could see viruses, cellular organelles, and even the fine structure of molecules. The hidden world revealed by the microscope expanded into unimaginable depths, showing that even the smallest forms of life were themselves composed of intricate systems. In the modern era, microscopes continue to be essential across science and technology. From medical research to materials engineering, from nanotechnology to forensics, the ability to observe the smallest structures remains at the heart of discovery. Microscopes guide surgeons in delicate procedures, help biologists trace the pathways of disease, and allow chemists to study the arrangement of atoms. They are not just tools of vision but instruments of understanding. The cultural impact of the microscope is as profound as its scientific contributions. It changed how humanity sees itself. Before its invention, the boundaries of perception seemed fixed. The microscope shattered that limit, revealing that what appears solid and simple is in fact layered, complex, and dynamic. It taught humanity that reality extends far beyond the reach of unaided senses. The invention of the microscope was not just a technical achievement. It was a philosophical shift, reminding us that truth often lies hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. From the first crude lenses of the Jansons to the powerful electron microscopes of today, this instrument has illuminated the invisible, transforming mystery into knowledge. It has given us access to the unseen architecture of life itself, changing forever the way we understand the natural world. Vaccination. For much of human history, disease was an ever-present shadow. Epidemics swept through cities and villages, claiming countless lives and leaving survivors scarred or weakened. Smallpox, plague, and measles shaped the course of civilizations as much as wars or politics. Before the modern age of medicine, protection against such illnesses seemed beyond reach. The invention of vaccination changed this reality. It was the first great triumph of preventive medicine, offering not only treatment but immunity, shielding individuals and communities from the devastation of disease. The origins of vaccination are closely tied to the long struggle against smallpox, one of the deadliest diseases known to humanity. Smallpox had existed for thousands of years, leaving its mark in the scars of survivors and the collapse of societies. Mortality rates were staggering, and those who lived often carried permanent disfigurements. By the 17th century, smallpox was a global terror, feared in every part of the world. Before true vaccination, there existed a practice known as variolation. This method, developed in Asia and Africa, involved deliberately introducing material from smallpox sores into a healthy person, usually through a cut in the skin or inhalation. The procedure often caused a mild form of the disease, after which the patient gained immunity. Variolation was risky, some died as a result, but compared to the deadly outbreaks of natural smallpox, it offered a chance of survival. Knowledge of this technique spread to the Ottoman Empire and then to Europe in the 18th century, where it gained attention among physicians and aristocrats. The breakthrough came with the work of Edward Jenner, an English physician in the late 18th century. Jenner observed that milkmaids who had contracted cowpox, a mild disease affecting cattle, seemed resistant to smallpox. In 1796, he tested his idea by introducing material from a cowpox sore into the arm of a young boy. The boy developed a mild illness but did not contract smallpox when later exposed to it. Jenner's experiment demonstrated that immunity could be safely achieved without the deadly risks of variolation. He called the method vaccination, from the Latin word vacca, meaning cow. Jenner's discovery spread quickly. At first, there was skepticism and resistance, but the results were undeniable. Communities that adopted vaccination saw smallpox cases decline. Governments began to support the practice, and by the 19th century, vaccination campaigns were taking place across Europe and beyond. The concept of preventing disease through controlled exposure had entered medical science, transforming how humanity approached health. The significance of vaccination extended beyond smallpox. Once the principle was established, that the body could be trained to resist disease through exposure to weakened or related agents, scientists sought to apply it to other illnesses. In the late 19th century, Louis Pasteur built upon Jenner's work, developing vaccines for rabies and anthrax. Pasteur's contributions demonstrated that vaccination was not a singular event but the beginning of a broader medical revolution. The impact of vaccination on society cannot be overstated. For the first time, humanity could fight disease not reactively but proactively. Instead of waiting for epidemics to strike, people could prepare defenses in advance. Vaccination campaigns became public health measures, protecting not just individuals but entire populations. The concept of herd immunity emerged, showing that when enough people were vaccinated, disease could no longer spread freely, shielding even those who remained vulnerable. In the 20th century, vaccination expanded dramatically. New vaccines were developed for polio, measles, diphtheria, tetanus, and many more. Entire generations grew up free from diseases that had once killed or crippled millions. Perhaps the greatest triumph came in 1980, when the World Health Organization declared smallpox eradicated. It was the first time in history that a human disease had been completely eliminated, a victory made possible only through vaccination. The story of vaccination also reveals a deeper truth about human progress. It shows how careful observation, combined with courage and scientific inquiry, can alter the destiny of entire populations. From Jenner's modest experiment on a small English farm to global health campaigns spanning continents, vaccination represents the collective effort of humanity to overcome one of nature's greatest challenges. Even today, vaccines remain at the center of public health. They continue to protect against old diseases and new ones, forming a shield against threats that might otherwise overwhelm societies. They embody the principle that knowledge and prevention can triumph over fear and suffering. The invention of vaccination was more than a medical technique. It was a turning point in civilization, a reminder that human ingenuity can transform vulnerability into strength. By unlocking the body's natural defenses, vaccination gave humanity one of its most powerful tools, not only to save lives but to change the very relationship between people and disease. Photography. The invention of photography marked a profound transformation in the way humans perceived and preserved reality. For millennia, images were captured only through the hands of artists, painters, sculptors, and illustrators, each interpretation filtered through imagination and skill. But in the early 19th century, humanity found a way to let light itself record the world. It was a shift from memory and interpretation to permanence and objectivity. The moment photography arrived, the human relationship with time, history, and truth would never be the same. The story begins with the French inventor Joseph Nicephore Niepce. In 1826, after years of experimentation, he succeeded in creating what is often regarded as the world's first permanent photograph. Using a camera obscura and a polished pewter plate coated with a light-sensitive material, he captured the view from his window. The exposure took hours, but when it was complete, the image was fixed. What had once been fleeting, a moment of light and shadow, was now locked in place. Soon after, Niepce partnered with another Frenchman, Louis Daguerre, who refined the process. In 1839, Daguerre introduced the daguerreotype to the world. It was a breakthrough, a method that produced highly detailed, permanent images on a silver-plated copper sheet. For the first time, ordinary people could see themselves and their loved ones reflected with near-perfect accuracy. Portraits that had once required the time and expense of a painted commission could now be produced in a fraction of the time, and at far lower cost. The daguerreotypes spread rapidly, sparking wonder and fascination. Families sought portraits, cities commissioned landscapes, and scientists turned their lenses toward documenting discoveries. But even as this technology spread, it was only the beginning. Throughout the 19th century, new methods followed. The calotype, which used paper negatives, the collodion process, which brought shorter exposure times, and eventually, the flexible roll film developed by George Eastman in the late 1800s. With Eastman's Kodak camera, photography moved from the domain of specialists into the hands of the general public. The cultural impact was immense. For the first time, history could be documented with a fidelity beyond words. Wars, social movements, and moments of everyday life were captured not as interpretations, but as evidence. Photography became a witness to reality, a silent recorder of truth. It allowed people separated by oceans to share images of each other. It preserved memories of childhood, family, and love in ways that outlasted memory itself. But photography was not just about personal preservation. It reshaped science. Through microscopes and telescopes paired with cameras, researchers could capture details invisible to the naked eye, from the structure of cells to the distant face of the moon. Photography advanced astronomy, medicine, and physics. It allowed humanity to study, record, and verify phenomena with precision unmatched by drawings or descriptions. As the 20th century unfolded, photography became a central part of art, communication, and culture. Newspapers and magazines used photographs to connect readers to world events. Artists explored photography not just as a documentary tool but as a creative medium. Photographs carried emotion, meaning, and perspective, giving rise to entirely new forms of visual expression. The arrival of color photography deepened the experience, bringing images closer to the vibrancy of life itself. Later, digital photography erased the limitations of film, making it possible to take, store, and share countless images instantly. And with the rise of smartphones, photography became universal, woven into daily life as an extension of memory and communication. From Niepce's grainy first image to the billions of digital photographs taken every day, the invention of photography has redefined how humanity interacts with time. It turned moments into artifacts, fleeting sights into lasting records. It gave memory permanence, history clarity, and the present a kind of immortality. Photography, at its essence, is the capture of light. Yet its impact has been far greater. It is the capture of humanity itself. Its faces, its landscapes, its triumphs, and its struggles. A silent, enduring archive of what it means to live and to witness the world. Radio. The invention of radio marked the beginning of a new era in communication. An age when voices, music, and information could travel invisibly across great distances. Before radio, human communication had always been bound to physical limitations. Letters carried by hand, signals transmitted by wires, and sounds restricted to the range of hearing. With radio, sound itself became untethered, could move through the air, across oceans, and into the homes of millions. It was a revolution not just of technology, but of connection. The roots of radio lie in the late 19th century, with the study of electromagnetic waves. In 1864, the Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell had predicted their existence through his mathematical equations. 2 decades later, Heinrich Hertz, a German physicist, proved Maxwell's theory by generating and detecting electromagnetic waves in the laboratory. These invisible vibrations of energy could travel through space, carrying information without the need for wires. Hertz himself did not foresee practical applications, but his experiments opened a path that others would follow. In the 1890s, the Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi built upon these discoveries. He developed a system that could send Morse code signals over long distances using wireless waves. By 1895, he had managed to transmit signals over a distance of more than a kilometer. A few years later, in 1901, he achieved what many thought impossible: a wireless transmission across the Atlantic Ocean. For the first time, messages could cross oceans without cables, connecting continents through invisible waves. The age of wireless communication had begun. Radio soon found practical uses in maritime communication. Ships at sea, once isolated, could now send and receive signals from shore or from other vessels. This proved invaluable for navigation and safety. During disasters, such as the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, wireless communication became a lifeline. The ability to transmit distress signals saved lives and underscored the importance of radio as a tool for survival. As the technology matured, it moved beyond Morse code. Engineers and scientists developed ways to transmit voice and music. In 1906, Canadian inventor Reginald Fessenden made one of the first known voice broadcasts, reading passages and playing music that were heard by astonished listeners. Soon after, regular radio broadcasts began to appear. By the 1920s, radio stations were emerging across Europe and the United States, bringing news, music, and entertainment directly into people's homes. The cultural impact was extraordinary. For the first time, entire nations could listen to the same voice, the same music at the same moment. Radio created a shared experience across distance and class. It connected urban centers and rural communities, informing and uniting people in ways that newspapers never could. Leaders addressed citizens directly through the airwaves. Musicians reached audiences far beyond concert halls. News traveled instantly, shaping public opinion and awareness on an unprecedented scale. Radio also played a crucial role in science and exploration. Astronomers adapted radio technology to study the cosmos, giving rise to radio astronomy. Physicists used it to probe the nature of electromagnetic waves, and engineers continued refining the technology, leading to advances in microphones, amplifiers, and transmitters that would influence later inventions such as television and radar. During the 20th century, radio became central to both daily life and historical events. It was a source of comfort during times of war, carrying reports from the front lines and speeches from leaders. It was also a medium of entertainment, broadcasting dramas, comedies, and live performances that captured the imagination of millions. For many, radio became a constant presence, a familiar voice in the background of life. Even with the rise of television and the internet, radio has endured. Its simplicity and accessibility keep it alive across the globe, from modern digital broadcasts to small community stations. In remote areas, radio remains a vital source of information. In cities, it continues to provide music, news, and voices that connect listeners to the wider world. The invention of radio transformed the invisible into the essential. What once existed only as abstract waves of energy became a lifeline of communication and a source of culture. It demonstrated humanity's ability to harness the unseen and use it to bring people together. At its core, radio is a union of science and humanity. It is Maxwell's equations brought to life, Hertz's experiments expanded into practice, Marconi's vision carried across oceans, and countless voices carried across time. It is invisible yet powerful, silent yet filled with sound, a reminder that the unseen forces of the universe can be shaped into instruments of connection, binding humanity together through the air itself. Nuclear power. The discovery of nuclear power revealed one of nature's most profound secrets: the immense energy locked inside the heart of matter itself. For most of human history, energy came from visible, tangible sources: fire, water, wind, and later coal and oil. But in the 20th century, humanity uncovered something far more powerful, hidden within the atom. It was an energy invisible to the eye, bound by the forces that hold the universe together. Its release would change the world, for better and for worse. The foundations were laid in the early 20th century, when physicists began to explore the structure of the atom. In 1896, Henri Becquerel discovered radioactivity, observing that certain materials emitted invisible rays. Soon after, Marie and Pierre Curie expanded this work, identifying new radioactive elements and showing that atoms were not indivisible, as once thought, but dynamic and energetic. The atom was no longer the smallest, unchanging unit of matter. It was a source of hidden power. In the 1930s, the German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann achieved something unprecedented. They bombarded uranium with neutrons and discovered that the atom had split into lighter elements, releasing a tremendous burst of energy. Lise Meitner and Otto Frisch, interpreting their results, realized this was nuclear fission. The idea was astonishing. By splitting atoms, energy could be released on a scale far beyond any chemical reaction. The potential was immense, and so were the consequences. During World War II, nuclear fission was developed under the Manhattan Project. Scientists and engineers raced to harness the atom's energy for a weapon, believing it could determine the outcome of the conflict. In 1945, the world witnessed the destructive power of nuclear energy in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The devastation was overwhelming, and the event marked the beginning of the nuclear age. Humanity had unlocked a force capable of reshaping civilizations, but also of annihilating them. Yet even as nuclear power revealed its destructive side, it also held the promise of progress. Scientists envisioned reactors that could generate vast amounts of electricity by controlling fission in a safe environment. In 1951, the first experimental reactor in Idaho produced usable electricity. Soon, nuclear power plants began appearing across the world, offering an energy source that did not rely on burning fossil fuels. By splitting atoms in carefully controlled reactions, reactors could produce enormous amounts of power with relatively little fuel. Nuclear energy quickly became part of national infrastructure. Cities were powered by reactors that operated day and night, producing electricity without the smoke of coal or the emissions of oil. For many, nuclear power represented modernity, progress, and the ability of science to provide clean, abundant energy for the future. The atom, once a symbol of destruction, was now also a symbol of innovation. At the same time, nuclear power brought challenges. The safe management of radioactive materials, the risk of accidents, and the problem of long-term waste storage created concerns that could not be ignored. Events such as the accidents at 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima reminded the world of the risks inherent in harnessing such immense power. Each incident shook public confidence and forced nations to weigh the balance between potential and danger. Despite these challenges, nuclear power remains one of the most significant inventions of the modern age. It is capable of generating vast amounts of energy with minimal greenhouse gas emissions, offering a path toward addressing climate change. It is also a reminder of humanity's responsibility, the need to control forces that, if misused, could cause irreparable harm. Beyond energy production, nuclear science has advanced medicine, agriculture, and research. Radiation therapy saves countless lives in the treatment of cancer. Radioisotopes allow scientists to trace processes within the human body, study ecosystems, and develop new technologies. The same forces that split the atom for power and weapons have also given humanity new tools for healing and discovery. Nuclear power is a paradox, immense promise entwined with immense risk. It demonstrates the brilliance of human ingenuity, the courage to explore the unseen, and the responsibility that comes with unlocking nature's deepest secrets. It reminds us that progress is never simple, that power is never neutral, and that knowledge carries weight. At its heart, nuclear power is a story of transformation. From the invisible heart of the atom to the visible lights of cities, from destruction to creation, from fear to possibility. It is proof that within the smallest building blocks of matter lies a force as vast as the stars, waiting for humanity to choose how it will be used. Satellite. The invention of the satellite carried humanity's vision beyond the limits of Earth. For the first time, machines built by human hands could orbit the planet, circling silently in the void, gathering knowledge, and sending it back to the surface below. Satellites turned the sky into a new frontier of science, communication, and exploration. They reshaped how people saw the world, literally, from above, offering a perspective once reserved only for imagination. The story began during the tense years of the Cold War, when technology and ambition pushed nations toward space. On October 4, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite. It was a polished metal sphere, only about the size of a beach ball, but its impact was immense. As it circled the Earth, transmitting a simple radio signal, it proved that humanity could send objects into orbit. The sound of its signal, faint but steady, was heard across the globe. It marked the beginning of the space age. The United States responded quickly, and in 1958, it launched its first satellite, Explorer 1. Unlike Sputnik, it carried scientific instruments that led to the discovery of the Van Allen radiation belts, rings of charged particles surrounding Earth. From the beginning, satellites were not just symbols of technological achievement, but tools of knowledge. They extended human senses beyond the surface, turning space into a laboratory. The potential of satellites became clear almost immediately. They could orbit above continents and oceans, capturing data and images that would transform science, communication, and daily life. In 1960, TIROS-1, the first successful weather satellite, sent back cloud images that allowed meteorologists to track storms with accuracy never before possible. Soon after, communication satellites like Telstar began to relay television broadcasts and phone calls across oceans, erasing the distance that once separated nations. Satellites also revolutionized navigation. Systems like the Global Positioning System, or GPS, rely on constellations of satellites orbiting Earth. By measuring signals from multiple satellites, a receiver on the ground can determine its location with remarkable precision. What was once a military tool has become a part of daily life, guiding ships, airplanes, cars, and even phones in people's pockets. The ability to know one's position anywhere on Earth is one of the quiet revolutions satellites have brought to the modern world. Beyond communication and navigation, satellites have become indispensable for science. They monitor the health of the planet, measuring deforestation, tracking melting glaciers, and observing changes in the atmosphere. They provide images of Earth that allow humanity to see itself as a whole, a fragile sphere suspended in darkness. They extend vision outward as well, studying the Sun, the planets, and the universe beyond. The Hubble Space Telescope, though technically more of an observatory than a conventional satellite, has shown humanity distant galaxies, nebulae, and stars in breathtaking detail. Satellites have also played critical roles in global security and cooperation. They monitor borders, track military movements, and provide early warnings of missile launches. At the same time, they enable rescue operations, humanitarian aid, and disaster response by showing where help is needed most. From war to peace, satellites are instruments of both vigilance and compassion. The influence of satellites reaches into nearly every aspect of modern life. Television broadcasts, internet connections, mobile phone signals, banking systems, and weather forecasts all depend on satellites orbiting silently above. They are so woven into the fabric of society that their presence is often unnoticed. Yet without them, the modern world would feel disconnected and unrecognizable. Despite their benefits, satellites also raise challenges. The growing number of objects in orbit has created concerns about space debris, with thousands of fragments circling Earth at high speeds. The question of how to manage and protect the space environment has become increasingly urgent. Satellites remind humanity not only of its ability to reach beyond Earth, but also of its responsibility to preserve the pathways it creates in space. From the humble beeps of Sputnik to the vast networks of satellites that surround Earth today, the invention of the satellite represents one of the greatest achievements of human ingenuity. It is the act of placing a voice, a sensor, a pair of eyes into the heavens, and allowing it to look back at the world that sent it. Satellites are both distant and intimate, separated from humanity by hundreds of kilometers of space, yet essential to the rhythm of daily life. They are silent, yet their presence is constant. They have turned the sky into a mirror, reflecting back knowledge, connection, and perspective. In their orbits, satellites carry not just technology, but the vision of humanity itself, the desire to reach higher, to see farther, and to understand more. Smartphone. The invention of the smartphone represents one of the most profound transformations in modern history. Unlike many earlier innovations, which addressed a single need, the smartphone combined countless technologies into a single device: communication, computation, photography, navigation, and access to the world's knowledge. It is both a tool and a companion, carried in the pockets of billions, shaping how humanity works, communicates, and even thinks. The origins of the smartphone lie in the convergence of two inventions: the telephone and the computer. For much of the 20th century, these technologies followed separate paths. Telephones connected voices across distances, while computers processed information and calculations. By the late 20th century, engineers began to imagine a future where these functions could merge. In 1992, IBM introduced a device called the Simon Personal Communicator, often regarded as the first true smartphone. It could make calls, send faxes, and manage contacts and schedules, all with a simple touchscreen interface. Though limited by today's standards, it hinted at a future where a single device could replace many others. Over the following years, other companies experimented with designs, creating early models that combined mobile phones with email, calendars, and basic internet access. The breakthrough came in 2007, when Apple introduced the iPhone. Unlike earlier attempts, it offered a seamless touchscreen interface, internet browsing, and an open platform for applications. It was not just a phone, it was a handheld computer, a music player, a camera, and a gateway to the digital world. The iPhone's success transformed the mobile phone industry and set the standard for what a smartphone could be. Competitors followed quickly, and within a few years, smartphones became central to daily life for millions around the world. The impact of smartphones has been immense. They have changed communication, making instant connection possible across the globe. Text messages, video calls, and social media allow people to share words, images, and experiences instantly. Families separated by oceans can see each other's faces in real time. Friends can remain connected despite distance. Information flows freely, not by the pace of letters or even emails, but by the immediacy of a tap on a screen. Smartphones have also become powerful tools of knowledge. With internet access at hand, questions that once required books or experts can be answered instantly. Navigation systems guide travelers through unfamiliar streets. Cameras capture moments and share them instantly with others. Banking, shopping, and learning can all be done from the palm of the hand. The smartphone has condensed countless separate tools, maps, calculators, radios, typewriters, and cameras, into a single object. The cultural changes have been equally significant. Smartphones have altered how people consume media, shifting attention from television and print to digital platforms. They have created new forms of entertainment, from streaming to social networks. They have also reshaped how individuals perceive time and presence, with constant notifications and the ability to be connected at every moment. For many, the smartphone is the first thing seen in the morning and the last thing touched at night. At the same time, smartphones have raised new challenges. Their constant presence blurs the boundaries between work and rest, between public and private life. The flood of information can overwhelm, and the pull of screens can distract from the physical world. Yet despite these concerns, smartphones remain indispensable. They are woven into the fabric of modern existence, guiding daily routines and shaping the flow of societies. The invention of the smartphone stands as a culmination of centuries of innovation, combining writing, printing, telecommunication, photography, radio, and computing into a single device. It is a story of convergence, where technologies once separate became united in the service of connection and access. In the span of just a few decades, the smartphone has become a universal companion, bridging distances, storing memories, and serving as an extension of human thought. It is a reflection of both progress and dependence, of opportunity and responsibility. More than a tool, it is a symbol of the digital age itself. Humanity's desire to remain connected, informed, and present in a world that moves faster than ever before. Ending. And so, from paper to the smartphone, we have traced inventions that reshaped the world and changed the way humanity lives, thinks, and connects. Each discovery, each breakthrough, has carried us further on the path of progress, building the foundations of the world we know today. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this video along to others who might find it inspiring. Together, we can keep exploring the stories of the ideas that continue to shape our world.